At Thanksgiving dinner, my sister put down my job and made fun of me for marrying a broke mechanic, all while bragging that her brilliant investor husband would make them rich soon. But when his deals fell apart, my parents suddenly pushed me to sell my shop to save them. They thought I was the quiet failure, the one who married a mechanic and chose the simple life. They had no idea that greasy garage, the one they laughed at, held the secret to their entire future, and that I was about to watch their world crumble, piece by painful piece. It was Thanksgiving, one of those ridiculously cold Denver evenings where every house on the block smelled like turkey and maple-glazed ham. My parents' living room was buzzing, just like always, with the usual mix of aunts, uncles, and cousins who mostly pretended to like each other. The wine glasses clinked, the chatter rose, and then, right on cue, my older sister, Bianca, swept in. She was the family's self-appointed star, arm in arm with her husband, Lucas, the so-called genius investor everyone worshipped. We were barely seated when Bianca lifted her glass, flashing that perfect, sharp smile of hers. To family, she announced, and to Lucas, who's about to close a fund that will make us billionaires. My parents beamed, nodding proudly, their eyes practically shining. Then, of course, they turned to me with that familiar, patronizing pity. "And Lena," Bianca added, her voice dripping with faux concern, "still married to that dirt-poor mechanic in that greasy little shop of yours?" Such dedication to simplicity. Everyone laughed. I swallowed hard, feeling the burn settle deep in my chest. But a quiet resolve, something they could never see, was hardening inside me. They truly had no idea what that dirty shop actually held, or how soon they'd be on their knees, begging me to sell it to save Lucas. They thought they knew who the failure in the family was. They were so wrong. Growing up, that Thanksgiving table scene wasn't new. It was just the adult version of a script my family had been rehearsing my entire life. Bianca was always the sun in our house, bright, loud, impossible to ignore. The daughter everyone praised for her beauty, her confidence, her ability to charm a room before she even knew how to spell her own name. My parents loved it. They fed it, watered it, polished it. Every talent show, every group project, every family gathering, they pushed her right to the center. "Look at Bianca," they'd gush. "She was born for the spotlight." And then there was me. Quiet, observant, the kid who preferred taking apart remote controls or fixing my bike to cheer camp or pageants or whatever new spotlight Bianca wanted that summer. I wasn't rude. I wasn't rebellious. I just never needed applause the way she did. But in my family, not craving attention made you invisible. Worse, it made you plain, boring, lacking ambition. Their words, not mine. I can still hear my mother sighing, once, while sorting laundry. "Why can't Lena be more present?" she'd muttered, as if present meant sequins and loud laughter. My father, bless his heart, once told a neighbor, right in front of me, "Bianca is our little star. Lena's just different." He meant it as a descriptor, I guess, but it landed like a diagnosis. My parents had this very clear definition of success, and they taught it to us early. Money, image, networking, performing. If you couldn't post it, brag about it, or dress it up for a Christmas card, it didn't count. So, naturally, they poured everything into Bianca. Business camps, marketing workshops, finance mentors. They wanted her polished, packaged, profitable.
Me?
I preferred reading manuals, tinkering with engines, using my hands to fix and build things. I loved machines because machines made sense. People, honestly, never really did. Machines didn't judge, didn't gossip, didn't compare.
My father hated that about me.
"You're wasting your brain on useless hobbies," he'd say whenever he caught me rebuilding an old lawnmower for fun. "If you don't learn to network, you'll never be successful." My mother wasn't any gentler. "You're too smart to be average," she'd repeat, like my choices were a personal disappointment to her. "Why don't you study something real, like your sister?" Their version of real meant glossy careers, finance, business, marketing, the kinds of jobs that produced fancy titles they could brag about at dinner parties. So when I chose mechanical engineering in college, the look on their faces could have curdled milk. My father asked, "Why would you want to be in a field full of men and dirt?" Bianca just laughed. Yeah, what are you going to do? Fix tractors? And when I later became a community college instructor, teaching engineering basics to kids who had never held a wrench before, my parents practically mourned. A teacher? My mother gasped. At a community college? My father added. Honestly, you'd think I told them I was joining a cult. Every major argument in that house circled back to the same refrain. Why can't you be like your sister? Why don't you think bigger? Why are you choosing such small, invisible dreams? But the one that cut the deepest? You're wasting your intelligence on things no one will ever care about. Small, invisible, unimportant. Those were the boxes they built for me, long before I learned how to climb out of them. For Bianca, ambition was celebrated. For me, it was always questioned. If she worked late, she was a go-getter. If I stayed up all night building a prototype for a class, I was obsessing over nonsense. If she posted about a new job, my parents would forward the link to every relative.
If I
Published a research paper, my mother would shrug and say, well, at least you enjoy it. You can survive neglect. What you can't survive is being made to feel smaller, year after year. And over 3 decades, my parents perfected the art of shrinking me. Not physically, of course. Emotionally. In their eyes, I wasn't the daughter who rebuilt engines at 12, who repaired our broken washing machine at 14, who won a regional robotics competition at 16. Those accomplishments never mattered because they didn't sparkle under the right kind of light. I wasn't the type they could show off. And the thing about being overlooked for so long is that you learn to stop looking back. You learn to rely on yourself, to build quietly, to love quietly, to succeed quietly. But even quiet things grow. When I met Noah, years later, kind, steady, grease-stained Noah, who appreciated my mind more than anyone had ever bothered to, my parents didn't see a man with talent or passion. They saw a mechanic, a reminder of everything they thought I settled for. They didn't understand that choosing him wasn't settling. It was finally being seen.
But Bianca?
Oh, she loved the comparison. My sister had been raised to measure her worth by being above someone. And for 30 years, that someone was me. Looking back now, I realize the saddest part wasn't how badly my family misjudged me. It was how badly they needed to. To lift Bianca higher, they had to push someone lower. And I was the easiest person to push. 30 years of subtle cuts, loud dismissals, whispered comparisons, and eye rolls from across the dinner table. All of it shaping a wound they never expected would one day become a shield. They raised Bianca to shine, and raised me to disappear. But disappearing has a funny way of backfiring when the person you ignored quietly builds a life you can't control, a future you never saw coming, and a strength you can't manipulate. And what they especially didn't know, what they couldn't begin to imagine, was that all those years they spent calling me less, plain, boring, not like your sister, were the very years I was learning how to endure, how to focus, how to create, and how to survive in silence. The same silence that would one day protect everything they would try to take from me. I met Noah during a time when I was just tired of being measured, compared, and categorized. He worked at a small garage on the outskirts of town, a squat building with peeling paint, a gravel lot, and a hand-painted sign that read Noah's Auto and Repair. I first came in because my old Honda kept overheating on my commute to the community college. He had grease on his hands, dirt on his jeans, and a smile that belonged to someone who didn't need anything from me. The moment he spoke, quiet, steady, thoughtful, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe it was the fact that he listened, really listened when I explained the temperature gauge issue. Or maybe it was the way he looked at the car, then at me, with equal attention like neither was beneath him. For someone who'd grown up in a house where worth was determined by shine and showmanship, Noah's sincerity felt like stepping into fresh air. He didn't know who my family was, didn't care about job titles, and didn't look at me like I was less than or not enough. He asked about my classes, my research, the things I liked building in my spare time. We would talk for hours about engines, about life, about how things worked. And slowly, my trips to the garage stopped being about my Honda and became about him. He owned the garage outright, a small business he'd built from savings and elbow grease. In my family's eyes, that meant nothing. But to me, it meant everything. He was stable, hardworking, grounded. He created things, fixed things, made things better with his hands and his mind. He reminded me of the person I was before my family convinced me I wasn't enough. The first time my parents met him, an unmitigated disaster. My mother wrinkled her nose before he even reached the front door. "He smells like oil," she whispered to my father, loud enough for both of us to hear. My father didn't bother to hide his disappointment. "You're really going to date a mechanic?" he asked, as if I'd just announced I was joining a circus. Bianca showed up late, as always. And when she saw Noah, she broke into a slow, disbelieving smile. "Oh, this is him, Lena."
Wow.
I guess we all have different standards. When I told them later that Noah and I were serious, that we were talking about building a future together, the reactions were even worse. "You can't be serious," my mother said. "You're going to marry a mechanic? Lena, think about your life." Bianca chimed in. "He'll never be able to provide for you the way Lucas will. You deserve someone successful." And there it was again, that word, successful. The one they used like a ruler to measure my life. In their eyes, Noah wasn't tall enough to qualify. But I didn't care. Or, at least, I wanted not to care. Loving Noah was the easiest choice I had ever made. Telling my family about him was the hardest. When he proposed, a quiet moment on the hood of his truck under a fading sunset, I said yes, without hesitation. When I told my parents, they acted like I had personally wronged them. My father shook his head and muttered, "You're throwing your future away." My mother cried, but not the proud kind of tears, more like grief. Bianca asked if I was sure, as if I'd mistakenly grabbed the wrong ring from a store shelf. "Marriage is forever," she said. "You sure you don't want to wait for someone more aligned with your potential?" We had a small wedding, warm and intimate. Nothing like the glossy, over-the-top events my family adored. It took place in the backyard behind the garage, and on the small piece of land my grandmother had left me, a quiet stretch of green bordered by old oak trees. The kind of property that didn't look like much at first glance, but meant more to me than any luxury venue ever could. We strung lights between the trees, set up tables with mismatched chairs, cooked our own food, and invited the people who mattered. Not the ones who wanted to be seen, just the ones who wanted to see us. Bianca attended, of course, dragging Lucas along like an accessory. At that time, he was still her boyfriend, still the financial genius she bragged about to anyone within 3 feet. They walked in late, dressed like they were attending a charity gala rather than a family wedding. During the toasts, Bianca tapped her glass and looked around with a condescending smile. "I just want to say," she began, "this is such a lovely, rustic experiment." Her eyes flicked toward the garage behind us. "Really brave of you, Lena, to choose the simple life." The guests shifted uncomfortably. I felt my face burn. Then Lucas added, "It's refreshing to see a wedding that doesn't try too hard." Their laughter cut through the night like cold air. Still, the ceremony was beautiful, even magical in its own quiet way. The people who loved us cheered. Noah looked at me like I was the only thing that had ever made sense in his life. And when we exchanged vows, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Certainty. After the reception ended, and we were stacking chairs beneath the string lights, I caught Noah looking at the garage, the land, the stars. His hands were still greasy from helping clean up, his shirt dusty from carrying tables. He looked imperfect, tired, messy, and absolutely like home. I told him I was sorry for how my family acted. He shook his head, walked over to me, and gently cupped my face with his work-worn hands. "Let them laugh," he murmured. "One day, this shop will be more than they can imagine." His voice was steady, calm, not the tone of a man fighting back or trying to prove himself. He simply believed in us. And in that moment, something inside me hardened, not in anger, but in resolve. For the first time, I didn't just want to escape being underestimated. I wanted to build something real, something ours, something undeniable. I didn't know then how right he would be, how much that tiny garage, that patch of land, that grease-stained man would change the entire course of my life. All I knew was that the people who spent their lives measuring me were about to watch the ruler snap. After that night under the string lights, when Noah told me the shop would one day become more than anyone imagined, something in both of us shifted. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. There was no lightning bolt moment or a euphoric epiphany. It was quieter, like a door opening somewhere deep inside us, revealing a hallway neither of us had walked down before. We had always shared an interest in machines, in how things worked, in why they broke, and how they could be made better. But now, instead of tinkering out of curiosity, we began to tinker with purpose. Noah, despite what my family believed, had never been just a mechanic. He understood engines the way musicians understood sheet music, by instinct, by feel, by something deeper than technical training. He had a mind for patterns, pressure, torque, timing. He could listen to an engine and tell you what was wrong before the hood even opened. What my family dismissed as greasework was, in reality, a craft he'd spent years mastering. But he was more than that. Long before electric vehicles became mainstream, Noah was fascinated by hybrid systems, how energy could be captured, stored, reused. He read obsessively about battery density, regenerative braking, hydrogen conversions, anti-corrosion architecture for electric drivetrains. He had notebooks filled with sketches and formulas he kept in the drawer under his workbench. Most customers never saw them. Most people wouldn't have understood. And then there was me. They thought my degree and my teaching job were small, plain, insignificant. But my background in mechanical engineering and data analytics wasn't dead weight. I just never had a place to use it freely. With Noah, I did. I started coming to the garage after classes, spending evenings and weekends there, sitting beside him on the cold concrete floor with grease on my jeans and spreadsheets open on my laptop. We talked through ideas, drew out possible systems, researched newer components, contacted professors I still kept in touch with from school. It started small, adjusting fuel ratios on older trucks to reduce consumption. Then experimenting with insulative coatings to minimize rust on undercarriages, something that plagued fleet vehicles in Colorado's snow and salt-heavy winters. Then came the big idea, the one that changed everything: retrofitting older pickup trucks into low-emission hybrid systems, stronger, cheaper, and more durable than anything on the market. Fleet companies were always trying to extend the life of their vehicles. If we could create a solution that reduced maintenance costs and cut emissions without requiring them to buy brand-new EV fleets, we would be solving a problem that no corporation had managed to crack affordably. So we began. And failure became our nightly ritual. Our first prototype melted part of the casing because we underestimated thermal output. The second one produced so much noise the neighbors called to ask if we were running a jet engine. The third leaked battery fluid. The fourth caught on fire, thankfully small, and we managed to smother it before it spread beyond the test bench. But every failure taught us something new. And instead of breaking us, it bound us. We spent nights hunched over metal frames, soldering connections, scraping off burnt coating, adjusting torque converters and voltage regulators. There were times I would return home at 2 a.m. with my hair smelling like smoke or coolant, and students at the community college would sometimes ask why I had faint grease stains on my sleeves. I never explained. It felt like we were guarding a tiny flame in our hands, too early to protect openly, too precious to expose. We subscribed to journals, bought used textbooks, emailed experts, and even Skyped with a retired automotive engineer in Michigan who became a sort of informal mentor. Some nights we argued over calculations, over feasibility, over the cost of materials, but we always ended up on the same side of the problem. It was the first time in my life I felt like I was building something not just with someone I loved, but with someone who saw me fully. Then, after years of testing, refining, burning through savings, burning through prototypes, and burning through more metal than I could count, something finally clicked. A system that worked. A system that endured. A system that could be scaled, licensed, and adopted. Our hybrid retrofit wasn't sleek or flashy, but it was efficient, reliable, and shockingly cost-effective. It reduced fuel consumption, extended the lifespan of older trucks, decreased emissions, and cut maintenance costs enough that even a mid-sized local fleet could see the impact. And the anti-corrosion coating Noah perfected after more failed batches than we could count was durable enough to withstand Colorado winters at a fraction of the cost of current solutions. It wasn't just good. It was groundbreaking. That was the moment we realized we weren't tinkering anymore. We were inventing. So we documented everything. Drawings, formulas, test results, timestamps, video logs. Then we took it to someone we trusted. Adrian, a lawyer recommended by one of my former professors. He was calm, meticulous, and understood the importance of IP protection. "You two have something real here," he said, flipping through our research with the kind of excitement only lawyers who love paperwork can show. "If you want to keep this safe, we need to start the right way." Under his guidance, we filed for patents. We formed an LLC, Aurora Drive Systems, separate from the garage, so that no one, absolutely no one, could touch the intellectual property or underlying assets without our consent. Adrian walked us through trusts, liability shields, voting rights, ownership percentages, and contingency plans. He helped us structure the company so tightly that even if someone tried to force or manipulate us later, they wouldn't get far. And all of it happened in silence. We didn't post on social media. We didn't announce anything. I didn't tell my coworkers. Noah didn't tell customers. My parents, they still believed I spent my weekends helping my mechanic husband clean his shop. Bianca thought we were living paycheck to paycheck. Lucas thought Noah was one step above being unemployed. And that was fine. Better than fine. Their ignorance was insulation. Their dismissal was camouflage. Their pity was protection. So we let them think what they wanted. They saw a greasy garage. They never saw the server racks in the back office. The prototypes locked behind steel cabinets. The whiteboards covered in equations. The testing equipment we bought piece by piece. The blueprints laid out on the floor like maps of a future they couldn't comprehend. They believed we were small, invisible, forgettable. But in the quiet, away from their judgment, we were building something big enough to change everything. And soon, very soon, the people who spent their whole lives looking down on us would realize they had never once looked closely enough. While Noah and I spent our nights soldering wires, analyzing datasets, and burning through prototypes in the garage, the rest of my family was occupied with a very different kind of building, an empire of image. Bianca married Lucas the following spring in a wedding that could have doubled as a luxury car commercial. Everything sparkled. Her tiara, the chandeliers, the imported orchids lining the aisle. Even the guests seemed chosen for their gloss. Lucas stood beside her like a poster boy for financial success. The kind of man my parents dreamed their daughters would marry. A crisp suit, expensive watch, flawless smile, a portfolio so diverse he treated it like a personality trait. My parents cried at the wedding, but not the way they cried at mine. When I married Noah, their tears were disappointment. When Bianca married Lucas, their tears were pride. Almost overnight, my sister and her new husband became the golden couple of the family. Lucas managed a fund that invested in everything flashy: real estate, crypto, tech stocks, trendy startups that made headlines but rarely profits. He was the type who talked fast, dressed sharp, and made everyone feel slightly less intelligent just by standing near him. My parents adored him. Bianca adored the way everyone adored him. They bought a 5-bedroom house in a newer, shinier neighborhood, complete with a wine cellar they didn't need, a home office Lucas rarely used because he preferred working from rooftop lounges, and an entire walk-in closet Bianca filled with designer bags. My mother would beam every time she visited. "This is what success looks like," she said once, running her hand lovingly across Bianca's marble kitchen countertop. "See how a real man takes care of his family?" She said it while looking directly at me. Meanwhile, Noah and I kept living the way we always had. A modest home, older cars, garage doors that creaked when they opened. My parents rarely visited us, and when they did, they brought the kind of smiles people reserve for charity work. "You two must be working so hard," my father would say, staring at the grease-stained floor. "Living paycheck to paycheck can't be easy." Bianca echoed the sentiment during every family gathering, loudly enough for the aunts and uncles to hear. "You're so brave, Lena," she would say with faux admiration. I could never live like you. So simple, so humble. And she always made sure to mention Lucas immediately afterward, like a punctuation mark. Lucas is taking his fund to 1 billion next year, she would announce, raising her glass while everyone oohed and awed. It became a pattern. Every housewarming party, every birthday dinner, every holiday, they would shower praise on Bianca and Lucas, then glance at me as if to say, "See, this is how you should have turned out." They treated Noah like the struggle I had chosen, the evidence of my failure. But what they didn't know, what they didn't bother to know, was that while Lucas was throwing around investor jargon at cocktail hours, Noah and I were securing deals with actual engineers, signing NDAs with automotive consultants, and quietly moving Aurora Drive systems closer to something real. But image was everything to my family, and Bianca wielded it like a scepter. She hosted endless gatherings at the new house, each one more extravagant than the last. She invited people she barely liked just to show off her imported wine. Lucas strutted around with the confidence of a man who believed wealth made him untouchable. My parents followed behind them like devoted disciples. And I always felt like a ghost in those rooms. Present but never fully acknowledged. Seen only as the family disappointment who married a man with calloused hands. The moment that cemented this humiliation, the one I can still picture vividly, happened at yet another housewarming event. Bianca had just finished bragging about her upcoming trip to Tuscany when Noah approached my father with something he'd made just for him. A coffee table crafted from reclaimed truck parts, welded, sanded, and finished by hand. It was beautiful, industrial, artistic, unique. Noah had spent weeks designing it so it would match my parents' style, even though they never appreciated his work. He brought it into the room with this quiet, hopeful smile. "I made this for you," he told my father. "Thought it might look good in your den." My father stared at it for a few seconds, then glanced at Lucas before responding, as if he needed approval. Lucas raised an eyebrow, smirked, and whispered something to Bianca that made her laugh. My father cleared his throat. "It's creative," he said, his tone the same one he used for participation trophies. "But we just ordered a custom Italian table. You understand, right?" Bianca chimed in. "Oh my God, Dad, you can't put that next to your designer furniture." The room filled with polite chuckles. Noah nodded, pretending not to be hurt, and carried the table back outside. They left it on the back patio next to the trash cans where it sat untouched for the rest of the night. That moment burned more than any insult thrown at me because Noah, who had never wanted anything from them, had offered something made with kindness, skill, and sincerity, and they reduced it to junk in seconds. They didn't just belittle the table. They belittled the man who made it, the man they never considered good enough for their daughter. And by extension, they belittled me again and again and again. But what they didn't know was that every insult sharpened us. Every eye roll at our simple life, every whispered comment about blue-collar couples, every time Lucas bragged about his fund while subtly mocking our little garage, all of it strengthened the quiet fire inside me. Because the audience, unlike my family, already knew the truth. They knew what we were building. They knew what was coming. And the deeper the humiliation went, the more satisfying the explosion would be when everything flipped. This was my second emotional bottom. Another layer of belittlement stacked onto years of being seen as lesser. But this time, I wasn't the same invisible girl I grew up as. I was a woman carrying a secret that could change the trajectory of my entire family. And while the golden couple celebrated their superficial rise, Noah and I were preparing for something far bigger, far quieter, and far more powerful than any of them could imagine. What my family didn't realize was that while they were busy polishing their image, Noah and I were polishing something else entirely, a technology that was finally ready to leave the garage and step into the real world. It started with a small logistics company called Mile Track Transportation, based in Fort Collins. They ran a modest fleet of aging pickup trucks and delivery vans, constantly fighting engine wear, rust damage, and outrageous fuel costs. Their operations manager, a soft-spoken man named Harry, heard about our hybrid retrofit system through a retired engineer who'd been advising us unofficially. One afternoon, he showed up at the garage, hands in his coat pockets. eyes scanning our equipment like he wasn't sure whether he'd walked into a miracle or a scam. "We'll test one vehicle," he said. "Just one. If it works, we'll talk more." Noah and I spent 2 weeks retrofitting one of their oldest trucks, a battered Ford F-250 with half its original life left. When Harry returned, he brought his chief technician along. They drove the truck for a week, then 2, then 3, and at the end of the month, they came back with numbers that made all 3 of us stare in disbelief. Fuel consumption dropped by 22%. Maintenance costs were projected to drop by nearly a third. And the anti-corrosion coating Noah perfected survived a snowstorm that normally would have eaten through the undercarriage. "This," Harry said, slapping the side of the truck, "is real. Word travels fast in the logistics world, not through fancy press releases or LinkedIn posts, but through managers calling each other late at night, whispering, 'Hey, I think I found something good.'" A mid-sized regional fleet out of Wyoming reached out next. Then a municipal contractor in Salt Lake City. Then a private snow removal company with 70 trucks. They all wanted to test the system. And suddenly, our evenings weren't spent tinkering. They were spent negotiating. Adrian, our lawyer, found himself replying to more emails in 2 weeks than he had in the previous 6 months. Contracts needed drafting. NDAs needed tightening. Intellectual property needed reinforcement. The first licensing deal was small, $180,000 upfront, plus royalties per retrofit. But the second one was larger and the third one was bigger still. Within a year, Aurora Drive Systems was valued at just under $1 million. 6 months later, it hit 3. And by the time 2 national fleet operators started sniffing around, Adrian sat us down at the wooden conference table inside his downtown office and told us, "You 2 need to restructure before someone notices what you're sitting on." That was when the subject of my grandmother's land, the land where Noah and I married, the land behind the garage, came into the conversation. "If this stays under your personal names," Adrian said, steepling his fingers, "then in the event of any legal pressure, family, creditors, lawsuits, someone can try to force a sale." "Family?" I repeated, confused. Adrian gave me a look. "People get greedy when they smell success." He wasn't wrong. So, at his recommendation, we transferred the land and the garage into Aurora Drive Systems, LLC. Legally, they became company assets, protected, shielded, unreachable, without unanimous board consent. And since the board consisted of 3 people, me, Noah, and Adrian, as a non-voting trustee, no one could force us to do anything with it. Adrian also set up a trust to hold majority ownership with clauses so airtight, I joked he must have written them in steel instead of ink. Noah laughed. Adrian didn't. "You're about to build something worth millions," he reminded us. "You need to protect it as if it already is." By the time Aurora was valued at 8 to 10 million, Noah and I had stopped trying to process the numbers emotionally. It was too surreal, too vast, too different from the life everyone assumed we lived. We still lived in the same small house. We still drove the same old trucks. Noah still wore the same work boots until the soles started peeling. I still shopped at thrift stores for teaching clothes. We didn't upgrade anything, not because we were hiding our success, but because we didn't need to. We'd spent so many years being judged by people obsessed with appearances that we simply didn't care about looking successful. We were busy being it. We didn't post on social media, didn't throw parties, didn't remodel the garage into some futuristic lab that would attract attention. We kept everything small, quiet, understated. And because our families equated modesty with failure, they never suspected a thing. My parents continued introducing us at gatherings as the down-to-earth, simple couple who worked with their hands and preferred the small life. Bianca would tilt her chin up slightly whenever she talked to us, like success made her taller. "You guys are just so grounded," she'd say, which was her way of calling us poor without using the word. She'd brag endlessly about Lucas's investments, about the luxury trips they booked, about the house renovations they didn't need, but liked posting online. Lucas strutted around with the swagger of a man who believed he was the future of finance. Meanwhile, Noah and I quietly held intellectual property that could change the fleet industry and a company valuation that dwarfed Lucas's actual liquid assets. The contrast was almost funny. But at the time, we didn't laugh because we were still building, still improving the system, still negotiating contracts and optimizing the coding formula and expanding the retrofit compatibility and creating tiered licensing models. We were always one meeting away from another milestone, one prototype away from another patent, one partnership away from a national rollout. And through it all, no one in my family had the slightest clue. They thought we were small. They thought we were struggling. They thought our garage was a symbol of stagnation, not innovation. They thought Noah was a dirt-poor mechanic. And I was the daughter who never lived up to her potential. What they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that success built in silence is the kind of success no one sees coming until it's too late for them to react. And soon, very soon, that silence would shatter. Not because we wanted it to, but because someone else, someone arrogant enough to think he could beat the market, would force it into the light. The first crack in Lucas's golden image appeared so quietly that my family didn't notice it at first. It came a few months after that Thanksgiving dinner, the one where Bianca toasted to becoming billionaires, and everyone laughed at the thought of Noah and me running a tiny, greasy shop. At first, it was just whispers, small mentions in niche financial forums, muted comments from industry insiders, a line or two about aggressive positions gone wrong. Lucas had always loved taking risks. He believed volatility was proof of genius. So when rumors started circulating that his real estate fund was over-leveraged and his crypto plays were bleeding money, most people assumed it was normal turbulence. Markets dipped. Markets recovered. Investors panicked, then bragged again. But this time the dip didn't bounce back. The losses kept piling up, and eventually the whispers became louder. My father was the first in the family to panic. Not because he cared about Bianca's marriage or Lucas's reputation, but because quietly, foolishly, he had invested a chunk of his retirement money into Lucas's fund. He hadn't told anyone except my mother. And she, desperate to believe her eldest daughter had married a prodigy, had encouraged him.
"He knows what he's doing," she had said.
"Lucas is brilliant." They never once mentioned it to me. To them, advice flowed one way, downward. But the truth didn't stay hidden for long. One afternoon, as I was preparing lecture notes on engine thermodynamics, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin Andrea, the only person in the entire extended family who had never talked down to Noah or me. The cousin who always saw through Bianca's theatrics and my parents' favoritism. Her voice came through the phone in a frantic whisper. "Lena, you need to hear this." She had stopped by my parents' house earlier that day to drop off holiday pastries. And just as she stepped inside, my mother was pacing in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, her voice trembling. Andrea hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the conversation was loud, frantic, impossible to ignore. According to her, my mother kept saying, "How bad is it? How bad?" while my father ran a hand through his thinning hair, muttering, "Millions? How could he lose millions?" Bianca's voice crackled through the speakerphone on the coffee table. "It's not all gone," she insisted, her pitch high and strained. "It's temporary. The real estate deal isn't dead yet. Lucas just needs time." But another voice, my uncle's apparently, cut in sharply. "Time doesn't matter when the SEC is circling." Okay, that was when Andrea froze. SEC? As in federal investigation. As in not a small problem, as in career-ending, life-destroying, prison-adjacent problem. My mother gasped. What about the clients?" Bianca hesitated. "Some are threatening lawsuits. They're accusing Lucas of misrepresentation." And then came the line that made Andrea call me immediately afterward. My father, in a low, angry growl, said, "Lena is the only one with real assets. That land, that stupid shop, she owes it to the family. She can sell it. It's time she finally contributes." Owes it. Finally contributes. As if decades of dismissal suddenly entitled them to my life's work. Andrea repeated the words exactly, as if she knew how deeply they would cut. I felt my throat tighten. My grandmother's land, the place she left for me, the place where Noah and I had married, where we had built prototypes and spent sleepless nights. It was sacred. It was ours. That stupid shop was Aurora Drive Systems headquarters. It was legally protected. But my parents didn't know that, and they planned to come for it. According to Andrea, they were already making calls. Bianca wanted to bring a lawyer, one of Lucas's contacts, ironically. And they planned to show up at our house within days, maybe sooner, to talk, which meant strong arm. They believed they could guilt me, pressure me, bully me into selling everything Noah and I built. They think you'll fold, Andrea said quietly. They think you're still the quiet one who doesn't fight back. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Rage, betrayal, and heartbreak sat heavy in my chest. My parents hadn't asked if we were okay. They hadn't apologized for the years of mockery. They hadn't even considered the possibility that my life had value outside of how useful it was to Bianca. The only reason they were thinking of me at all was because they needed something, and they believed they were entitled to take it. That night, I sat with Noah on the front porch, the winter air cold enough to sting our cheeks. The sky was clear, star-studded, silent. But inside me, a storm was forming. I told him everything Andrea had heard. Every word, every plan, every insult wrapped in entitlement. Noah listened without interrupting, hands clasped between his knees, jaw tight. He wasn't surprised. Not really. He had always understood my family better than I wanted to admit. But hearing the words out loud shifted something in him too. They think they can force us, he said finally, his voice steady in that dangerous way that meant he wasn't angry. He was past angry. They think they can show up with a lawyer and just take everything. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. He exhaled slowly, looking out across the land my grandmother had given me. Lena, he said gently, there's something I need to tell you. Something I found out about Lucas months ago. I turned toward him, confused. What do you mean? Noah hesitated, as if weighing how much to say, then met my eyes. I think it's time you knew everything about what he's been doing. Not just with your family. With us. A chill ran through me. Not from the cold, but from the quiet intensity in his voice. Whatever Noah knew, it wasn't small. It wasn't simple. And it wasn't something Lucas or Bianca ever wanted me to discover. Noah placed a steady hand over mine. Before they come after the shop, he said, you need to understand what Lucas has been betting on and why it's about to blow up in his face. And just like that, the real twist began. Noah didn't say anything else at first. He simply stood, walked inside, and returned with his old laptop, the one covered in grease thumbprints and stickers from automotive conferences we'd attended together. He set it gently on his knees, opened a folder I had never seen before, and turned the screen toward me. I wasn't going to show you this until I was sure, he said quietly. But after what Andrea told you, you need to know everything. Rows of charts filled the screen. Performance graphs, fund disclosures, SEC filings, and something that looked like a risk model. For a second, I didn't understand why he was showing me financial analysis. Then he clicked on a file labeled Short Positions Lucas A. Grant Fund, and my stomach dropped. Right there in black and white was the truth. Lucas didn't just dabble in trendy investments. He ran a hedge fund with aggressive, high-risk, high-leverage positions. Bets that could either make him a fortune or bury him alive. One of the largest bets in his entire portfolio was a short position against one company, Aurora Drive Systems, LLC. Our company. The company Noah and I built from years of sweat and failure and fire and hope.
What?
What am I looking at? I whispered. Noah scrolled slowly, letting me read every line. It's what I discovered 3 months ago, he said. He didn't just doubt us. He didn't just think the technology wouldn't work. He bet millions, his money, client money, on the belief that Aurora would fail spectacularly. My breath caught in my chest. I stared at the numbers, staggering numbers. Lucas had shorted our company so heavily that if Aurora collapsed, the fund would have made massive profit. But because Aurora didn't collapse, because we succeeded, his short position had exploded. He called us hype, Noah continued. He told investors he had insider knowledge that Aurora was overvalued garbage run by a mechanic who didn't understand finance and a woman who wasted her engineering degree. Insider knowledge. Garbage. Mechanic. Woman who wasted her degree. Every word felt like a blade carving through me. Not because Lucas dismissed us, that had been expected, but because he had weaponized that dismissal into financial ruin for others. He hadn't just mocked us at family dinners. He hadn't just humiliated Noah. He had built an entire investment strategy around the assumption that we were incapable, unworthy, and destined to fail. Why would he do this? I asked, though deep down I already knew. Noah looked at me with eyes both sad and steady. Because betting against people is easier when you never respected them in the first place. Lucas thought the little garage was nothing. He thought Noah was nothing. He thought I was nothing. And that arrogance was now devouring him from the inside. Noah scrolled further. More documents. More numbers. More red lines. Every licensing deal we signed made his short position bleed. Every partnership, every improvement, every success we kept quiet for our reasons pulled him deeper into the hole. I felt dizzy. So, his collapse, it's tied to us? I whispered. Directly, Noah said. He told his investors he expected Aurora to tank. When it didn't, they lost millions. And now the SEC is sniffing around because someone reported that he claimed to have insider information about our technology. My hands trembled. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to quiet the storm rising inside me. My own brother-in-law, the man Bianca worshipped, had literally bet on my destruction. And now, my parents wanted to tear apart my life to save him. It was almost poetic in its cruelty. The next morning, Noah and I drove to Adrian's office downtown. The winter sun was bright, almost mocking, turning the sidewalk silver as we walked in. Adrian was already waiting. Stacks of files spread across his desk. He listened as we explained everything. Andrea's warning, my family's plan, the looming confrontation. When Noah finished, Adrian leaned back, hands steepled, and let out a slow, controlled exhale. I suspected something like this, he said. Not this exact scenario, but something involving the family. That's why I pushed so hard for the land transfer and the trust. So, they can't force us to sell? I asked, bracing myself. No, Adrian said firmly. They can't. The land and the garage are corporate assets. Even if they came with 10 lawyers, even if they tried emotionally manipulating you. He glanced at me knowingly. They legally cannot compel a sale. Relief washed through me, but only for a moment. Adrian clicked open another file and turned his screen toward us. As for Lucas, he continued, this is much more serious than a bad investment. Shorting a company isn't illegal, but shorting it while claiming insider information that doesn't exist, while misleading investors, that's securities fraud. A federal crime. The kind that ends careers and destroys wealthy families faster than market crashes ever could. And the SEC investigation? Noah asked. Very real. And if they dig far enough, which they will, they'll discover his misrepresentation, possibly even deliberate market manipulation, depending on how he framed your company's valuation. I pressed a hand to my forehead. So, what do we do? Adrian folded his hands. Nothing. Nothing.
Yes.
Nothing. Do not reach out. Do not warn them. Do not hint at what you know. Let them come to you, because they will come. And when they do, they will show their hand completely. Let them make the first move, emotionally, legally, strategically. Then, when they push too far, we respond. He wasn't talking about revenge. He was talking about protection, about ending the cycle. They think you're weak, Adrian added. They think you're the quiet one they can bully. But you have something they don't expect. Leverage. Backed by law. When they walk into that garage, they'll believe they're holding all the cards. Let them believe it. Then show them they never held a single one. As Noah and I walked out of the office, snow began falling, soft, silent flakes landing on the pavement like tiny white warnings. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in my life, not out of fear. It was anticipation. My entire childhood had been built around shrinking for others. But now they were marching straight into a confrontation. They thought they would win. And they had no idea the world had already changed. They came on a Saturday morning early. Too early for it to be anything but an ambush. Noah and I were in the back of the garage. adjusting a calibration unit when I heard multiple car doors slam at once. Not a knock, not a call ahead, just the unmistakable sound of entitlement marching straight toward us. When I stepped outside, my parents were already halfway across the gravel lot. Bianca trailing behind them in oversized sunglasses, even though it was cloudy, and Lucas, pale, gaunt, nothing like the smug genius investor he'd once performed as. A man in a suit followed, their lawyer, carrying a leather portfolio, face tight like he already regretted being dragged into this mess. My father didn't bother with greetings. "We need to talk," he said, brushing past me as if he owned the place. My mother sniffed the air with visible disgust. "It smells like chemicals," she muttered. Bianca, already shaky, clung to Lucas's arm as if she expected him to collapse. Lucas avoided my eyes. That was new. They gathered in the center of the garage, right where Noah and I had tested prototypes for years, completely unaware they were standing on the foundation of the very thing they were trying to steal. The lawyer opened his portfolio and slid a stack of papers onto the workbench, clearing a space without asking. "This is a purchase agreement," he said, tapping the documents. "A developer is ready to buy this land and the shop immediately at a generous price." Generous price. They really thought I would jump. My father crossed his arms. "Your sister's husband is in trouble. Deep trouble. And you owe it to this family to help." My mother nodded fiercely. "We raised you. We supported you. This is your chance to give back." Bianca broke then, her voice cracking into high, trembling notes. "If Lucas goes to prison, our entire life is over. Lena, you don't understand. The house, the investments, everything will crumble. You can't just stand there and let that happen. You have to save your family." Then she jabbed a finger at me, mascara already starting to streak. "You're being selfish. You always pretend to be so quiet, so righteous. But now you won't even help your own blood." Noah stood at my side silently, jaw clenched, waiting for my cue. Adrian, who'd arrived moments earlier and positioned himself by the doorway, watched everything like a man who had seen this scene play out in other families, other battles, other betrayals. And me? I stayed silent. I let every word spill out. Let them lay bare every justification, every demand, every threat dressed as obligation. I wanted them to exhaust themselves with their audacity. I wanted the audience to hear the full depth of their entitlement before the turn. Finally, when they paused just long enough to breathe, I stepped forward. "There's just one problem," I said softly. "You're trying to sell something you don't own." For a moment it was almost comical. My father blinked, confused. My mother frowned. Bianca froze, tears suspended mid-trickle. The lawyer cleared his throat with forced confidence. "The title search shows the land is in your name. Legally, you can proceed with this sale." I smiled, not kindly. "Then your title search is outdated." Noah opened a side door and Adrian stepped fully into view, straightening his tie. "Allow me," he said, placing a folder beside the lawyer's documents. 2 years ago, the land and the garage were legally transferred into Aurora Drive Systems, LLC. Miss Brooks, he gestured toward me, is the co-founder and majority owner. No transaction involving these assets can occur without full board approval. My mother shook her head. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Adrian answered calmly, "you cannot force a sale. Not emotionally, not legally, not in any universe governed by contract law." My father's face reddened. "But she owns it, she—" "No," Adrian interrupted, voice still maddeningly calm. "The company owns it. And the company is not for sale." Bianca stared at me as if I'd spoken in another language. "Why would you put the land in some business? That's reckless. You're just a teacher." She nodded at Noah. "Just a mechanic." That was when Noah stepped forward, placing another document on the table. "Actually," he said, "we're founders." I slid the final set of papers across the bench toward Lucas, the hedge fund report Noah had shown me on the porch. "And speaking of mechanics," I said, my voice steady as steel, "let me tell you what your husband has been doing." Lucas's hands shook as he picked up the report. His eyes darted across the pages. Bianca looked between us, confused and terrified. My parents hovered uselessly behind them. You shorted our company, I said. You bet millions on Aurora failing. You told clients you had insider information that we were a worthless operation. And because we succeeded, your fund lost everything. Bianca gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Lucas, tell me that's not true. Lucas's lips parted, but no words came out. He simply stared at the damning proof, the charts, the filings, the positions deep in the red, like a man watching the walls collapse around him. Adrian stepped in again, this time with the precision of a surgeon. Mr. Grant, he said, your short positions alone aren't illegal, but your claims of insider knowledge, your misrepresentation to investors, and your failure to disclose conflicts of interest are. The SEC will be very interested in these documents. My father sputtered. You can't turn him in, Lena. Tell him. I raised a hand. No one is turning anyone in. Not yet. Adrian nodded beside me. We do not intend to pursue anything unless you attempt to coerce or threaten my clients. But if you try to force any sale or contact them again regarding liquidation, we will submit everything to the SEC. Every file, every recording, every inconsistency. Silence. The kind that stretches. The kind that marks the collapse of delusion. Bianca crumbled first. She sank onto a crate beside her, mascara streaked, body shaking. Everything was supposed to work out, she whispered. Lucas was supposed to make us rich. He promised we'd never have to worry again. Lucas leaned against the wall, ghost pale, unable to face anyone. My mother looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. My father's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I let the quiet settle before I said the final blow. The one they had earned, not out of cruelty, but out of truth. You spent your whole lives betting against me, I said softly. For once, the market just gave you your answer. Then I pointed to the door.
Leave.
All of you. And don't come back. And one by one they did. Out of the shop, out of the land, out of my life. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel overlooked. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. In the weeks that followed the confrontation at the garage, everything my family had built, their illusions, their pride, their carefully curated image, began to collapse like a glass chandelier dropped from too high. At first, I thought they might try to fight back, to argue, to plead, to bargain. But shock has a way of silencing even the loudest people, and the fallout started almost immediately. The SEC investigation into Lucas accelerated once other investors began filing formal complaints. Lawsuits piled up, allegations of misrepresentation, failure to disclose conflicts, and reckless short positions he had encouraged clients to take based on inside information. His fund froze withdrawals, then halted operations entirely. Investors panicked. Some threatened class action suits. Others demanded criminal charges. Every glamorous social media post he'd ever made suddenly turned into evidence of arrogance. Every expensive vacation was reinterpreted as irresponsibility. His entire empire, one built on swagger and borrowed shine, crumbled under the weight of real scrutiny. Bianca tried to hold herself together at first. She posted vague quotes online. Hard times reveal true friends. Storms make trees take deeper roots. That sort of thing. But when the foreclosure notice hit their mailbox, she disappeared from every platform. The house she once flaunted with house tour videos was listed at a loss within weeks. The walk-in closet she filled with Chanel bags went up on resale sites for fractions of their original price. She blocked nearly everyone, including relatives, because she couldn't bear the pity, or worse, the whispers. The golden couple had become a cautionary tale overnight. My parents didn't fare much better. With my father's retirement savings tied into Lucas's failing fund, he lost nearly everything he'd invested. My mother, who once hosted lavish Thanksgiving dinners with perfectly folded napkins and monogrammed place cards, now refused to talk about the holiday at all. Their house, the one with the manicured lawn and annual Easter brunch, was too expensive to maintain. They sold it quickly, bitterness guiding every box they packed. They moved into a small condo outside the city, one with thin walls, narrow hallways, and no place to host the neighbors they once competed with. And yet, despite everything, they clung to a single narrative. Lena abandoned the family when we needed her most. They repeated it to cousins, relatives, church acquaintances, anyone who would listen. They painted themselves as victims, insisting they would have done anything for their daughters, conveniently omitting the part about trying to steal my business to save the man who had gambled away their future. But the truth has a way of settling like dust and sunlight.
People talk, documents leak.
Even those who believed my parents' story at first eventually heard enough to realize something darker lurked beneath the surface. A few relatives reached out to me quietly. Apologies whispered, sympathies offered. But by then, I no longer needed validation.
I no longer needed anything from them.
Meanwhile, Aurora Drive Systems entered a chapter that even Noah and I hadn't dared to imagine, just as Adrian predicted. Interest from major auto tech corporations spiked. One company flew us to California for a 2-day pitch meeting. Another sent a delegation to tour the garage, trying to hide their surprise when they realized the tiny shop was the birthplace of a multi-million-dollar breakthrough. Eventually, a formal acquisition offer came in, $22 million upfront, plus salaries for both of us to stay on for 3 years as R&D directors and royalties for any future adaptations of our core technology. We sat at our kitchen table, still the same small one we'd bought secondhand years ago, and read the offer over and over, unsure if we were dreaming or merely exhausted.
We didn't rush.
We negotiated carefully, with Adrian guiding every step. In the end, we accepted a hybrid deal. Partial acquisition, partial retained equity, enough money to secure our future without giving up the soul of the technology we'd poured ourselves into. The first wire transfer cleared on a Thursday morning. Noah and I stared at the number in the account, then at each other, overwhelmed not with excitement, but with something deeper, relief. The years of being underestimated, ignored, belittled, they no longer held weight. Their voices could no longer reach us. But we didn't change our lives overnight. We didn't buy a new house, didn't trade our trucks, didn't flood our feeds with announcements. Instead, we paid off every debt: student loans, small business loans, the lingering credit card balances from years of prototype failures. We set up a trust to protect the land and the garage forever, exactly the way my grandmother would have wanted. We created savings accounts for future kids, for retirement, for emergencies. We began investing wisely, not grandly, not loudly, but safely. Noah still spent afternoons in the garage, choosing projects he liked, restoring vintage cars for neighbors, helping an elderly veteran fix the truck he couldn't afford to replace, teaching a group of local teens how to rebuild engines. I continued teaching part-time at the community college, not because I needed the salary, but because I loved the students, the ones who reminded me of younger versions of myself. Curious, overlooked, underestimated. We lived simply, not because we had to, but because we understood now, perhaps better than ever, the difference between wealth and worth. The real victory, though, wasn't monetary. It wasn't the acquisition or the trust or the patents. It was the silence.
The peace.
The absence of my family's constant comparisons, judgments, and condescending advice. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking to fit inside the narrow frame they built for me. For the first time, I wasn't competing with Bianca's spotlight or my parents' expectations. For the first time, I was living without their voices shaping every decision. Some people think revenge means hurting the people who hurt you. But real revenge, quiet revenge, is choosing a life they can no longer touch. A life where their opinions hold no currency. A life defined not by escape, but by freedom. And standing next to Noah on those calm, ordinary mornings, coffee in hand, sun rising over the land my grandmother entrusted to me, I finally understood something I should have known all along. The greatest victory I ever claimed wasn't proving my family wrong. It was finally choosing a world where they no longer had the power to define me. 1 year later, Thanksgiving didn't feel like a holiday I had to endure. It felt like a day I had earned. Not a performance, not an obligation, not a stage for my parents' yearly comparison games, but a quiet celebration of the life Noah and I had built with our own hands. The garage, once cluttered and dim, had been renovated into a warm, bright workspace with polished concrete floors, new lighting, and a small lounge area. The company insisted we add it so employees had a comfortable place to gather, and that's where we decided to host our first Friendsgiving. We cooked everything ourselves. Noah's smoked turkey, my roasted carrots with honey glaze, Andrea's homemade rolls she'd learned from her grandmother. Employees drifted in with their partners, carrying pies and cider jugs. Neighbors came by with side dishes still warm from the oven. Even a few longtime customers, the kind who remembered Noah's earliest days fixing trucks for barely enough money to cover parts, showed up with gifts, stories, and gratitude. No one cared about titles. No one cared about money. No one cared about image. For the first time, I looked around a crowded room and didn't feel invisible. I felt chosen. Not by blood, but by respect, by kindness, by sincerity. Andrea, leaning against one of the workbenches with a mug of cider, watched everything unfold with a soft smile. She waited until I walked over before speaking. "You know," she murmured, "your parents still think you'll go back one day." I raised an eyebrow. She nodded. "They told Aunt Linda last week. Just give it time. Lena will soften. She always does." I let out a slow, steady breath, not from anger, just from the quiet realization that my parents hadn't changed at all. "And Bianca?" I asked. Andrea's smile dimmed. "Still with Lucas."
Somehow.
They moved into a rental near the mall.
She took a job at a boutique. And
She shook her head.
he's doing odd jobs.
"No one in finance will touch him." Word spreads quickly when the SEC keeps your file open. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not anymore. There was a time when I thought justice meant watching people suffer consequences. But standing there, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, I realized the real justice was distance. The clean, quiet space between me and everything that had once hurt me. "I'm not angry anymore," I said softly. "Just done." Andrea nodded as if she'd been waiting for that exact sentence. "Good," she whispered. "You deserve to be done." And she hugged me, one of those rare hugs that says more than words ever could. Later that evening, while we were slicing pie and debating whether mashed potatoes count as a dessert, Noah insisted yes. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I didn't want to look. Not on Thanksgiving. Not tonight. But something in me knew exactly who it was. It was from my mother. Just 6 words. "We miss you. It's not the same." No apologies. No acknowledgement. No ownership. Just nostalgia for the version of me they once controlled. I stared at the message for a long moment. Not with longing, not with pain. Just with clarity. Then I locked the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Noah brushed my arm lightly. "Everything okay?" "Everything okay," I smiled. "Better than okay." When the last guest left and the garage grew quiet again, I stepped outside onto the small wooden porch Noah had built last spring. The cold night air wrapped around me, crisp and bracing. The land my grandmother left me stretched out under the moonlight. Soft hills, oak trees swaying gently, the same soil where Noah and I had planted our vows years ago. I remembered her voice from childhood, warm and impossibly steady. "I trust you'll do something meaningful with this place someday." Back then, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was talking about a garden or a home, or maybe just keeping the land from being sold off. But now, standing there with a full heart and a quiet mind, I finally understood. It wasn't about the land. It was about the life I would build on it. A life defined not by approval, but by integrity. Not by performance, but by purpose. Not by family ties, but by chosen family. I hadn't just built a company. I had built myself, piece by piece, choice by choice. And I had finally stopped letting the people who doubted me be the ones who defined me. As I watched the lights from the garage glow softly behind me, I thought about how far we had come, from a dirty little shop mocked by my own family to a place filled with laughter, friendship, and innovation. I breathed in the cold night air, steady and sure. Healing wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was this: a quiet night, a warm home, a life I chose. And as I turned back toward the door, ready to go inside to the people who actually cared about me, I thought of you. Yes, you listening to this story.
So,
Let me close with a question, the same one we share at the end of every story on this channel. If the people who are supposed to love you spent years betting against you, would you still call them family? If my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that gut-wrenching choice between loyalty and your own integrity, then you know this feeling. You're not alone. I want to hear your story, too. Share it in the comments below, or just let me know what part hit you the hardest. If you believe in standing up for what's right, even when it's terrifying, please give this video a big thumbs up. Subscribe to join this community, where we talk about finding our strength, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's next. Your support helps amplify these vital conversations. Thank you for listening.